We know from the research specialist expertise in content and process, pedagogic and subject matters. You know, it really is a key indicator of success. So we got from the research, particularly the fourth episystematic review, in particular what it is you're looking to specialist expertise for. First of all, it's about raising the ceiling. What in-depth specialists know is how much richer, better, further learning could be. And that's the challenge they bring. They illustrate possibilities unthought about. They're very important in contextualising generic pedagogic approaches in depth in specialist contexts, and that's quite a hard journey to travel. The externality seems to be particularly important in challenging groupthink, in illustrating, you know, and finding the questions that move people on. And the other thing that specialists seem to be really important in is schools are full of quite good things. It's about helping schools identify a few things that are highest impact for the particular learners they're focused on and helping them do those really well. And actually I was reanalyzing all these data for an AERA paper which is on our website in terms of what's particular about closing the gap. And that part of specialist expertise is incredibly important, this expertise. But I want to just show you some of the interesting and surprising things about the kind of people turn to, the kind of places where they go, and the processes in accessing specialist expertise. So here we've got an array of things coming out of the various data streams. And the first thing that leaps off the page at you, a few primary schools, blue is primary and red is secondary, a few primary schools do access heads of departments, mainly from neighbouring secondary schools. But look how little subject coordinators are thought to offer specialist expertise in primary schools. It kind of makes sense, but it's sort of shocking when you see it. If you know how much time subject coordinators spend scrutinising pupils' work and teaching, it's an enormous quantum of time in the system not being used for professional learning. If you then look at not only what people say they use, but how useful they find it, and I've just taken 3 out of there, heads of departments, primary schools find the heads of departments they do get access to really useful. They'd like more. Secondary schools have got some way to go in helping heads of departments learn how to facilitate the learning of their colleagues. Subject coordinators don't get used much, they're even less useful. I mean, it's bonkers. There's something urgently we need to do and think about this. SLT in primary schools are used a lot and felt to be very useful. SLTs in secondary schools, not so much. Now, that, I think, is mostly to do with this subject specialist expertise point. I think most of the teachers we've interviewed and seen focus groups think their SLT, well, many of them, not all schools, but in many schools, they think SLT are really helpful in terms of generic pedagogy. But there's such a hunger for time and a chance to contextualise generic whole school pedagogic issues in depth in a subject context, and I think that's what that gap is about. We'd expect the observation and feedback thing, wouldn't we, a lot. It's very heartening to see how much it is there as part of professional learning, because these aren't leading questions, you know, people get free choices at the beginning and then we build up the picture and test it through other research mechanisms. But this is the comparison of useful and used. And so observation and feedback in primary school is as useful as much as it's used. That's very interesting and heartening, albeit that neither heads nor teachers in primary schools necessarily, if you contract this back then to specialist expertise, see yet what more in-depth specialist expertise about subjects could offer. But look in secondary, you've still got this gap between used and useful, and again, we think a lot of this is to do with chance to contextualise that. You know, when you get observation and feedback, that's by someone who understands both performance, Ofsted, good pedagogy, that whole piece, and what that means in relation to a particular subject. The world starts to sticks turn into carrots quite quickly at that point. Pre-made resources is fascinating. Primary school teachers would love more of them, thank you very much. They don't get many and they'd like loads more. Secondary school teachers get loads and loads of them, and they know perfectly well that designing their own would be a much better professional learning experience. And I think that's a very interesting difference between the sectors. And here are the places people are using. Internet reading, we're really interested in that. You know, I suspect there's loads of downloading of lessons going on here. We think there's some VLE in that as well. I think it's more downloading materials. Conferences, quite a lot, and seminars. Quite a lot of magazines and book going on, reading on. That's that compared with usefulness. So people really are finding the internet. I really don't think that slide would look like that 5 years ago. And I think that's a really important new thing. Conferences in secondary school, an awful lot, huge amount of this is examples, an enormous amount of that